All right, y'all, so I have something a little bit different for you today. Bernie Sanders and Lindsey Graham decided to do a debate. They did it on the Fox Nation channel. I guess this is like the live stream version of Fox News. You know, everybody's trying to expand online. It's what CNN was doing with CNN Plus, and then that failed spectacularly, but I guess Fox Nation is hanging in there and doing a little bit better. So Brett Baer hosted a debate between Bernie Sanders and Lindsey Graham. It went on a couple days ago. I wanted to go ahead and watch it with you guys. This is the first time that I'm watching it, and we'll break it down as we go here. So credit to Case Study QB, who grabbed this and posted it on Odyssey here. He posted it in two parts, so let's go ahead and get it started.
Please welcome Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham.
Bernie. Thanks for doing the job.
Senators, great to see you.
Thank you.
This probably feels like home.
This
the
is
well
awesome.
of the Senate. We agreed to do a coin toss.
Okay.
Very official. To start this off, just to show you the coin. This is heads. This is the Statue of Liberty. And then on the backside is tails right here. Senator Sanders, you get to call it in the air since this is home field advantage.
Absolutely.
For you. All right.
Heads.
It is heads. Senator Sanders, you get to choose whether you go first or Senator Graham goes first.
I'll go first.
Senator Sanders, the floor is yours.
Well, let me thank
That's sort of an alpha move because, like, usually you have an advantage if you go second because you could hear whatever the person says and then incorporate in your opening statement, not just whatever you want to say, but also rebut some of the stuff that your opponent lays out there.
the Kennedy Institute for hosting the event, Fox News for broadcasting it, and my colleague Lindsey Graham for being here with me. I am the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. So what I'm going to tell you today is not something that you hear very often on Fox or CNN or ABC or the Washington Post, or in fact in the halls of Congress. What I'm going to tell you is that the working class and the middle class of this country are in serious trouble. We are moving toward an oligarchic form of society where a small number of
We're already in an oligarchy, effectively, I would argue. But so far, this is strong.
billionaires not only have extraordinary wealth, they have extraordinary political power. We are living at a time when half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck in the wealthiest country on earth, when 70 million Americans have no health insurance or are underinsured, when we have a starvation minimum wage at the federal level of $7.25 an hour, where half of the elderly workers, older workers in this country, have nothing in the bank as they fear retirement. What I believe is that now is the time not to defend the establishment, which is doing phenomenally well. When you have two people on top in America who own more wealth than the bottom 40%, two people, top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. CEOs of major corporations today are making 350 times more than their workers, and we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in American history. Now is the time for the American people to stand up, make it clear that enough is enough, and that we need a government that starts representing all of our people, not just wealthy campaign contributors. What does that mean? It means that we have to end a corrupt political system in which big money buys elections. It means that we have to end a very unfair tax system in which billionaires in a given year don't pay a nickel in federal taxes. It means we have to raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. It means that we have to join every other major country on earth in understanding that health care is a human right, not a privilege, and stop spending twice as much per capita on health care to enrich the drug companies and the insurance companies. It means that Medicare is going to have to negotiate prescription drug prices so that we can lower the cost of prescription drugs by 50%. It means that we cannot continue to be the only major country on earth not to have paid family and medical leave. It means
He's sort of freaking it right now. He came to play. He's being aggressive. He's being concise. He's being direct. And it looks like he didn't skip a beat from Bernie on the campaign trail, and even Bernie in the debates going back as far as 2015 and 2016. So this is good stuff. Now, I have criticisms of Bernie and how he's conducted himself in the Biden era and how his friendship with Biden has gotten in the way of him playing the kind of politics he needs to get the right kind of change. But having said that, you can never deny that this guy is a very plain-spoken and influential and important politician. And he sort of, woke a lot of people up and he shakes them out of their complacency, and he's made people become social democratic or democratic socialists, and he really represents the ideology of a younger generation that was looking for, some official figure that can mirror our views. And so while there are criticisms there, you can't deny this. I mean, he's effectively a phenomenal politician, and you can see why in poll after poll, he always comes back as the most liked senator of all the senators.
We have to restore the $300 tax credit so that we are not continuing to be a nation which has one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the United States. It means that we have to expand Medicare to cover dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses so that elderly people in this country can live out their remaining years in dignity. And it means, among other things, that we cannot continue to ignore climate change, which is an existential threat to this planet. And obviously, given the tragedies that we have faced in the last month in terms of guns, we need serious and real gun safety legislation. Bottom line, let's create a government that works for all of us, not just the people on top. Thank you.
Senator Graham.
Well, thank you very much. This is an awesome place. If you get in Boston, come see the place. I want to thank, we're here to honor Ted and Orrin. Ted Kennedy, Orrin Hatcher were great friends. They fought like tigers, but they could work together. And I have a different take on things than Bernie, and we'll get through that here in a minute. But I like Bernie. Bernie's own message, I hear this every day, all the time, and he believes it. But I just want to remind you that
the question is, how do you not believe it? Everything there was just like pointing out objective problems that we need to solve. Do you just hear that and go, nah, I don't even think those are problems?
the Democrats are in charge. After hearing Bernie talk, you would believe we're building a wall to keep people in, not out.
That's actually a good point. And this is the issue with what Bernie's saying, is that, like, yeah, Biden has the presidency, Democrats have the House, and Democrats have the Senate, and you're talking about all these things like you guys don't have any power. Now, look, I get it. Manchin and Sinema are primarily to blame because they're blocking absolutely everything, every single provision of Build Back Better that was phenomenally popular. They are blocking. But also, Bernie, your good friend Joe Biden, is not breaking out that executive order pen. He's not legalizing marijuana. He's not freeing the nonviolent drug offenders. He's not lowering the cost of prescription drugs. He's not eliminating student loan debt. These are all things he could do right now. And you just defer to him. Look, if I was Bernie or if I was any elected official, I would try to get a group together that votes as a block, and I would have a meeting with Joe Biden and say, look, we're not going to vote for anything you're in favor of. We'll block everything unless and until you sign these executive orders. And you give him a list of like 10 things or 20 things. And Bernie, in theory, did this when he endorsed Biden, and Biden was like, oh, yeah, I'm in favor of the $15 minimum wage, etc. Then he doesn't deliver on any of it, but Bernie still supports Biden. So, Lindsey's not wrong to say, well, hold on now, you're in charge, so why aren't you doing those things?
Things are tough, but they're going to get better, right? And socialism is not the answer to all these problems. So I just want to remind you a little bit about where we're at. The Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House. All these problems that were talked about, they could change or fix if they could. Their agenda is not working. So here's what I want to tell you.
Well, they haven't done the things that Bernie said, Lindsey. He makes it seem like they've done it and those things haven't worked. They haven't addressed the issues that Bernie laid out because, again, the Democratic Party is corrupted by big money. It's corrupted by billionaires. It's corrupted by corporations. It's corrupted by a neoliberal ideology. So they haven't done the things, which is why the party has a really terrible approval rating.
Republican in 2022. Do yourself a favor and ask yourself the following question. Am I better off today than I was 2 years ago? And if you are in a world of hurt 2 years ago. Because most people are not better off today. And
people were doing horrible 2 years ago, and they're doing horrible today. So that's not a great question.
There's a reason. Policy matters. We're all Americans. Right. He loves his vision of America. I disagree with it, but I admire his passion. But here's where we stand. 8.6% inflation, the highest in 40 years. When you go to the grocery store for $100, you're lucky if you get a bag. Go fill up your car. You got to take a mortgage out to fill up your car. What's happened here? The policies that are being pursued by my Democratic colleagues are not working. The average American is in a world of hurt. 2 million people will come across the border illegally this year.
Oh, boy, here we go.
The highest in the history of the country. In December 2020, we had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years in April.
He's fudging facts here because, as you guys know, because Biden gets attacked from the left about this all the time, Biden actually has deported more people than Donald Trump. When Biden was VP, they called Obama the deporter-in-chief. Biden implemented or kept in place Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. That's a right-wing border policy. They kept in place the pandemic rule, which said, you know what, there is no due process if you come in this country illegally. We're just going to kick you right out, and there's no hearing, there's no trial, there's no nothing, there's no process there. So Biden has, in many ways, been hard right on the border. He's gone in lockstep with the Republicans on the border. He's deported more people than Trump. But the Republicans, they never say, you know what, you're doing what I like and I agree with, so I'm going to give you credit. They just pretend that Biden's in favor of open borders. Now, some of those policies are getting rolled back right now, but it's not because of Joe Biden. It's because of the courts. The courts decided that a lot of these things are unconstitutional. So in a world that Lindsey Graham was being honest, he would say, I agree with Joe on the border, and I think he's doing a decent job, and those damn courts are getting in the way. But he doesn't say that, because he's just a partisan hack, and he's trying to say Biden bad, Democrats in favor of open borders. It's real hackish stuff.
Of this year, it was over 250,000. This is dangerous, and it's irresponsible. And you're paying almost $800 a day to pay for an illegal immigrant child in U.S. custody.
First of all, I don't believe that. Second of all, how much are we paying for our endless wars? Got anything to say about that? Oh, that's right, you don't, because you support every single one of those wars. So I don't want to hear about, oh, it costs so much to make sure that a child can eat. I'm not morally outraged at the fact that maybe some of my tax dollars goes towards an immigrant child eating. I'm outraged over blowing up innocent children overseas.
It's breaking the bank, and it's just a matter of time till some terrorist comes over here and kills us all, if they could, because they don't see Bernie and I much different. We're Americans in their eyes. So we've got a broken border. We need to fix it.
I love how non-substantive this is compared to Bernie. Terror is going to come over and kill us all. Compare that with all the facts that Bernie was spitting.
Crime is rampant. This defund the police effort that you've been leading and others has taken a toll. I was picked up at the airport.
First of all, Bernie never called for defunding the police. Point number one. Point number two. The police haven't actually been defunded, you jackass. And this is a weird time to make that argument. At the same time, the defund the police people got to do a victory lap because the Uvalde police showed they probably shouldn't be funded. God, he literally talks in dumb Fox News slogans. At no point does anything that he say touch with reality.
By a couple of cops, and they patted me on the back. I thought I was in South Carolina. The bottom line is it's a tough time to be a cop now.
Oh, yeah.
Who wants to go into law enforcement? It's time to let the cops know you're not the problem, the criminal's the problem. So
I love how he pretends like we don't do veteran worship in this country and cop worship in this country. That's all we do. That's all we do. Those are the most venerated professions. We shit on teachers and we boost up cops. And this was the first time in a long time that the cops screwed up their own propaganda and their own PR, and the Uvalde thing was so terrible that basically everybody's against the cops. But of course, Lindsey Graham can't keep it real and say something about that. He has to act like, oh, woe is the cops, they're so oppressed.
Got a lot of problems. Vote Republican and stop this madness. This is the most radical, costly agenda in modern American history. It's not working for you, and it needs to change. And
the most radical, costly agenda. What agenda? What agenda? Nothing's been passed, Lindsey. Nothing has been passed. They tried to get Build Back Better through. That was a popular bill. It didn't get through. There's no universal pre-K. There's no elder care. There's no extended child tax credit. There's no Medicare expansion. What are you talking about? Nothing's been done. Biden's sitting there on his ass all day, every day. Again, by the logic of your philosophy, you should agree with him and like that.
They want to do more if they could. Vote Republican to stop packing the Supreme Court. We've worked hard to create a...
Nobody's packing the Supreme Court, you fucking psychopath. That's simply not happening. It's, okay, how does Bernie respond to all of this claptrap, all of this garbage? He hasn't said a single thing that's factually accurate.
conservative majority. They want to increase the number of people on the Supreme Court to make it liberal again. They want to federalize elections, doing away with the voter IDs and instituting ballot harvesting. They want to abolish the Electoral College so New York and California will pick the president in perpetuity.
Yeah, that'd be based. It's called the person who gets the most votes ends up winning in a democracy. That wacky idea. You want permanent rule by the minority. That's what you want. You want fewer votes to equal a win. Why? Because you can't get a majority of votes. Because your ideas suck.
Bottom line, it can be better. In 2019, we had the lowest poverty rate in modern history. African-American families before COVID were having the highest income in the history of following statistics.
We had a shitty gig economy where everybody worked for fucking OnlyFans or Uber.
Women were doing better. We had a secure border. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together. We had a country that was moving in the right direction. We had low gas prices and jobs were abundant. And along come COVID.
I love the argument that like everything was perfect in 2019. Can you imagine believing that? The country was still falling apart at the seams back then.
We can get back to that pre-COVID America, but you're never going to get back unless you change leadership in this country in 2022.
Kiss my ass, son. Here's a fact for you about 2019. 78% of the country was living paycheck to paycheck. 30 million people didn't have health insurance. 45,000 people die every year because they don't have access to basic health care. There's some other facts about 2019, you dipshit.
Senator Sanders, your response?
Just one thing as a matter of fact. I never called for the defunding of the police.
I stand corrected.
What I do believe in is, former mayor, as a matter of fact, who worked very well with our police department, is we need community-based policing that reflects the people in those communities, that we have to fight racism in every way that we can. But I've never called for defunding the police. Now, it's interesting to hear Senator Graham speak, because other than the partisan rhetoric, what you don't hear him talking about are, in fact, the most important issues facing this country. That's what the establishment does. And Lindsey is a very good and effective representative of the establishment. Does Lindsey have a concern that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people?
Nope.
That some 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time? I didn't hear much about that in that opening statement. Lindsey care that we have the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and that the pharmaceutical industry right now has 1,500 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C., to make sure that in some cases we pay 10 times more for the medicine that we need? Did Lindsey talk about the fact that we have in South Carolina and all over this country tens of millions of workers working for starvation wages? Did he talk about a corrupt political system in which billionaires today can start a super PAC? And I guess you have some familiarity with super PACs. They help fund your campaign. Who can spend
sniped, son. God damn. Okay, he sort of wrecking him. Because Lindsey, all Lindsey had was like, he was talking in like bumper stickers or fortune cookies, like Fox News platitudes. And Bernie's like, all right, step aside. You're going down, son.
Limited amounts of money to elect candidates. You have the absurd situation where super PACs frequently spend more money than the candidates themselves. I didn't hear Lindsey talk about the crisis of climate change or the reality that scientists are telling us. It's not Bernie Sanders, Lindsey. This is what the best scientists in the world are telling us. We don't get our act together. The planet we're going to be leaving our kids and future generations will be becoming increasingly uninhabitable. Talking about great cities like Charleston, South Carolina. You're aware of that. Neighborhoods flooding. There are people who are thinking that not only Charleston, but Miami, New York City will be half underwater by the end of the century. You got to talk about that. You got to talk about income and wealth inequality. Do you have a concern that two people own more wealth than the bottom 42%? Do you have a concern in terms of corporate concentration of ownership? You got three.
Lindsey would say, those people just worked harder, bro. We have a meritocracy. I believe in capitalism. So those two people just earned more than the bottom 40% combined. They earned more than like 130 million people combined. They just work that much harder.
Wall Street firms now, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, who control $20 trillion in assets. They control hundreds and hundreds of corporations throughout this country. Bottom line is we are moving toward oligarchy. And if we don't stand up and say that we need a government that represents working people and the middle class, I worry very much about the future of this country, and I hope you'll speak to some of those issues.
Well, I'll be glad to speak to my campaign.
Yep.
I raised $112 million. The average donation was about $40, lindseygraham.com. The bottom line is the America that we all seek to achieve, where everybody can do well, is not going to happen unless things change. You haven't called for defunding the police. Will you do me a favor and say publicly today, those who are calling for defunding the police, stop, because you're hurting the country. It's people in your party, the liberal wing, I don't know what you call these folks, but they believe the cops are the problem. You say you've never done it, but people in your party.
Notice how he didn't address any of the things that Bernie brought up. None of the real problems. He's going after the imaginary problem of, like, our police are defunded and useless now, and they have tiny budgets and they can't get anything accomplished. Like, what are you talking about? This is what he's doing. He's deflecting to grounds where he feels more comfortable. And he feels like, well, I could easily go after people for defund the police or abolish ICE, so I'll just keep bringing that up over and over.
You're doing it all the time. At the end of the day...
Let me put this in perspective for you. This would be like if every time Bernie talked, he pestered Lindsey on January 6th and Trump's attempted coup. And just insinuated like, well, you believe in that. You support that because you support Donald Trump, so you support a coup. Now, that would actually be more fair than what Lindsey's doing to Bernie. It would be like if that's the only thing Bernie kept bringing up. So in other words, it's a deflection. It's obfuscation. It's not actually engaging on the issues that Bernie just laid out.
Today, I believe climate change is real, but that's no reason to destroy the fossil fuel industry in this country. We're moving to electric cars, but that's going to be 2034, 2035. Your party has made us miserable when it comes to filling up our tank. Your party took 10 million acres out of production. You closed the ability to produce oil and gas in Anwar, and you wonder why it costs so much to fill up your car. What the hell's happened in the last 2 years? Their policy.
The U.S. is the #1 producer of oil and gas in the world, more than Saudi Arabia. So this idea of like, Biden's just waging a war on fucking oil and gas and fossil fuel industry, it's fundamentally not true. In fact, one argument from the left is they go after Biden for being too pro-fossil fuels. So yet again, he's just spewing wild inaccuracies.
You think this is an accident? I'd like to lower health care costs, but I'm not going to take away your private coverage. Senator Sanders has a bill called Medicare for All. Bring it to the floor for a vote. I'm begging you to take Medicare for All and bring it to the floor of the Senate, which looks just like this, and let's vote.
Well, here's what would happen. Virtually all of you guys are bought by the for-profit health insurance companies, so you will side with them and you will kill Medicare for All. That doesn't mean that Medicare for All is wrong. It means you guys are deeply corrupt.
The reason it won't pass is because you're going to take private health care away from 200 million Americans, put us all under the government umbrella. It's going to cost about $40 trillion. In 2034, we'll be spending...
It would save money. It turns out when you get rid of the rapacious, mafia-like for-profit middleman, it saves money and it gives everybody care, and we have all the evidence in the world to show that this system is superior. Look at the UK. Look at France. Look at Canada. Now, those systems are slightly different. Some of them are public funding of public institutions. Some of them are public funding of private institutions. But the connecting tissue is public funding. And that works better, according to every single study. Look at the Commonwealth Fund study that comes out like every few years. We always rank dead last on healthcare, and he's pretending like we have the best healthcare in the world and all these other systems are crazy.
As much to maintain Medicare for All as we do for the entire federal government today. And people will have less. You get what the government gives you when they're ready to give it to you. So this
is such bullshit. There's more rationing of care under the private system than there would be under Medicare for All. They have to prioritize profit. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make sure they pad the bottom line. So the way that the for-profit health insurance companies work is they deny care as much as possible. That's how they work. That's how they make more money. We need a system that's not for profit. It's just paid for by tax dollars.
The idea of Medicare for All destroys private sector health care, and that is not the answer. Immigration. When are you going to fix the border?
Wait, back to immigration? What happened? You went from defund the police to Medicare for All sucks to now immigration. You didn't address any of the points that Bernie brought up.
Y'all are in charge for 2 years. We've been telling you what you're doing doesn't work. I know you don't like Trump, but Trump got it right when it came to remain in Mexico. His policy secured our border.
Biden had Remain in Mexico in place, you absolute jackass.
You've repealed all those policies. We're having more people come here illegally than exist in the state of Vermont. How easy would it be for some terrorist group to get into the middle of this? human chaos. So I would ask you to focus on lowering gas prices, securing the border, and bringing law and order back to America. And the only way you're going to do that, Senator Sanders.
So ironic talking about law and order when, again, he supported Donald Trump. Donald Trump tried to overthrow a Democratic election. That is like the exact opposite of law and order. Donald Trump wantonly violated international law on a regular basis. He assassinated on a whim a top Iranian commander who was on the field battling ISIS. That's a brazen violation of law and order. So when you say law and order, you don't mean law and order across the board. You mean when we do it, it's okay. When poor people or black people do it, that's when I want you to crack down on them.
Sanders is abandon the agenda that you've charted for America, because it is not working.
Well,
this is one of those debates that reminds you, TFGs are a real thing. Lindsey Graham is a TFG. You're not going to find any fucking common ground with this dipshit. This guy is totally brainwashed by Fox News and his corporate donors. And like, this is just... So in other words, the whole point of this debate is to just show the difference in ideologies to the crowd. Now, I want to be more optimistic than that. There are certain debates with certain people where it's not just highlighting your differences and showing the crowd. But this is definitely one of those instances. You're not going to find any common ground with this guy because this guy's virtually wrong about everything.
talk about gas prices, because you're right. They are outrageously high. In Vermont, they're now filled up the other day, $5.05 a gallon. Meanwhile, the major oil companies made $35 billion in profit in the first quarter of this year. And at the end of the year, it is estimated they're going to give $88 billion in stock buybacks to their wealthy shareholders.
Wow.
So I do think we have to do something about the outrageously high price of gas. I think the president should bring the major oil companies in and tell them we're going to have a windfall profits tax on what they're doing in order to stop them from ripping off the American people.
Based.
You know, the last time that oil prices were at $118 a barrel, which is what they are right now, roughly speaking, average gasoline prices at the pump were $3.83, not over $5 a gallon. So I think in the midst of what...
Quick side point, and you guys already know this because you've seen the Matt Stoller article that I've shared with you a bunch of times, but 60% of inflation is just going to corporate profits. 60%. Lindsey Graham will never tell you that fact because it paints the corporations as greedy and price gouging and the bad guys. And in his worldview, corporations are good, government is bad.
What's going on in this world, and that is the war in Ukraine and Russia oil and the stopping of oil. I think what the oil companies are doing is taking advantage of that situation and raising prices to an outrageous level, which is hurting the American working family. But the issue goes beyond oil. The issue goes to healthcare. You talked about the cost of healthcare. I am sure you know that in the United States, Lindsey, we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country. While major countries like Canada, the UK, Germany manage to provide healthcare to all of their people. Why is that? Because they're not having oil companies, they're not having insurance companies ripping off the system. What we need to do right now is to take a deep breath, because this country, in fact, Lindsey Graham is right. We're in a lot of deep hurt. All over this country, Vermont, South Carolina, all over this country, people are hurting. But what we don't need right now is demagoguery. What we need is thoughtful solutions to the major crises that we face. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we need is a government that represents all of us and not just wealthy, powerful, special interests. So that is what I'm working on. What I believe, you talk about, will Medicare pass on the floor of the Senate tomorrow? No, it will not. But the real question is not whether it passes or not, it's what the American people want. And you know what the American people do want? They do want Medicare for all. You talk about the joys and beauties of private insurance. Talk to the millions of workers who lost their private insurance during COVID. So I think it is time for the...
New study came out recently which verifies an older study that Public Citizen reported on, which is 330,000 Americans would have survived COVID if we had universal health care. We had 330,000 more deaths than we needed to have. If we had universal health care, those people would be alive. Because a lot of people have private insurance, shitty insurance, or no insurance, and they wait to the last minute to go to the hospital because they don't want to pay the fucking bill, and when they go in, it's too late and they end up passing away. That's the system that Lindsey Graham supports. That's what he supports.
working families of this country to stand up, demand a government represents all, not just a few.
So I'm calling on Senator Schumer to bring Medicare for all to the floor of the Senate sooner rather than later so we can vote on it.
I know he thinks this is a gotcha. It is not a gotcha. What you're doing is asking to highlight your own corruption. You are bought by Blue Cross Blue Shield and Humana and Aetna and all these rapacious mafia-like companies. This is not a gotcha. It is not a gotcha to say the Senate, which has an approval rating of like 18%, is going to vote down a popular policy.
On it. Because if the American people want it, and those people who vote against it should lose their job. That's the way it works.
That absolutely should be how it works. That absolutely should be how it works. But unfortunately, with the influence of PACs and super PACs and corporate money, you guys are able to run misleading ads to dupe your constituents into thinking that you're voting for them and you're supporting them when you're not doing that. So big money has corrupted our system. It buys your votes, and it also buys the lies that you run on the airwaves to convince people, no, I'm actually fighting for you.
So in terms of your proposal for Medicare for all, I am challenging you and your party who run the Senate to blame it, bring it to the floor for a vote, and we'll see where the votes are. Now let's go back to gas prices. How did we go from energy independence to where we are now? Policy matters.
Like I said, we are the number one producer of oil and gas. We export most of that. Why? Because we don't treat it as this is the nation's oil and gas. We haven't nationalized the oil industry and the natural gas industry. Now, if we did that, we could have decided, hey, let's not outsource all this stuff. Let's not export it. Let's actually use it here because we need it. We want to bring the prices down so we can increase the supply to bring the prices down. Now, is Lindsey Graham going to say, you know what, we actually should nationalize oil and gas? No, he's never going to say that. Because again, he is a cuck to all the major corporations. So again, this idea that Biden's waging like a war on oil, nonsense. Nonsense. If anything, he's too supportive of the oil industry and the natural gas industry. What I would do is I would try to nationalize that industry, and then, I would use a lot more of that here domestically, and that would drive prices down.
During the campaign,
which, by the way, is something we just have to do in the interim before we get to renewable and green technology, which obviously is the future, and we need to transition to as fast as possible.
In 2020, President Biden and Senator Sanders campaigned against eliminating fossil fuels as we know it in America. Basically, shut it down. No fracking, shut down production. Let me tell you about...
This is so misleading because they also want massive jobs programs in order to bring about green and renewable technology that's the technology of the future. So you can't say it like, oh, they just want to shut it all down and leave everybody to struggle. That's not what they want at all. I mean, a lot of the proposals included massive jobs programs for West Virginia, for example, where it's coal country.
Oil prices, supply, demand. It was $2.38 a gallon, price of gasoline, before COVID hit. We went into lockdown because we had to. It went to $1.77. Now, nobody was saying give the oil companies a subsidy when it was $1.77.
You guys were giving them subsidies back then.
When Biden came into office, it went back to $2.38. What's happened between then and now? The policies you pursued,
more people are driving, you asshole,
in terms of energy production has decreased production in the United States in a very dramatic way. You took oil leases off the table, $45 billion tax on energy production. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. You took the $10 million...
all of that oil was going to be outsourced. All of it was going to be exported. All of it. He acts like that would affect domestic prices. It 100% would not.
10 billion acres that Trump put into production, out of production, and you're wondering what happened to gas prices. What happened to gas prices, you declared war on fossil fuels in the United States, and when you go to the pump, you're a victim of that war. Well, let's change that. Let's get back to a rational energy policy. Let's send American gas to Europe so they'll be less reliant on Russian gas. Let's cut Putin off at the knees. Let's find alternatives to Russian oil and gas. It's not the oil companies that are driving these prices. They want to produce more, they just can't. It's not Russia. It's 8% of the oil we use. It is the policies of this administration. The stated goal of this administration is to destroy fossil fuel production in America, and they're on track to do that. And folks, if you want to lower gas...
Biden has greenlit a lot more drilling. And the way Lindsey talks, you would think it's the exact opposite, that he did a massive moratorium on it.
Gas and oil prices, vote Republican to see if we can find a few Democrats will go back to increase production in America so that we can lower gas prices in a way that works. All I can tell you is, in terms of getting sick in America, more people come to America for health care than they go anywhere else. To our doctors and nurses who've been...
Yeah, only the richest of the rich, only like Saudi elites come here because they have all the money in the world. If you're, your average person, of course, you're going to want to go somewhere where it's free and high quality. You're going to want to go to Canada. You're going to want to go to the UK. I mean, this is absurd what he's saying here. Again, 330,000 people died, and they didn't have to. They died because we didn't have universal health care. That's a new study that just came out. During COVID, 330,000 extra deaths that didn't have to occur.
Through hell out there, God bless you.
Senator Sanders, 4 minutes for a closing statement here on this section 1.
Senator Graham talks about the need for more oil production. And that's just what the oil companies really want to do. Really? This year, they plan to provide $88 billion, not for new oil production, but for stock buybacks that go to the wealthiest people in the country, people who own their shares. As a nation, I think the time is very long overdue for us to have the courage to do something which is not easy. And that is to take on the people who contribute to Senator Graham's campaign and to Democratic campaigns. To tell the people on top who, during this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, which took 1 million lives, when millions of people are suffering with long COVID, where, as Lindsey says, our doctors and nurses performed absolutely heroically. And during that period, you know what else happened? The billionaires in this country saw a $2 trillion increase in their wealth. That's the people who own the oil companies, people who own the insurance companies, people who own the drug companies, people who own the major Wall Street firms. So the challenge that we face right now is to kind of envision the society we want for our kids and our grandchildren. Do we think that as a nation, all people are entitled to health care? I do. Is that a radical idea? No. It exists 50 miles away from where I live in Canada, which spends half as much on health care but guarantees health care to all people. It exists virtually in every major country. Not a radical idea. Is it a radical idea to negotiate prescription drug prices, that Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices? Of course it's not a radical idea. Why aren't we doing it? Because the pharmaceutical industry has endless amounts of money to buy politicians, to lobby, and to make campaign contributions. Is it a radical idea to say that every kid in this country, no matter where they live, has the right to get a higher education? I don't think so. Other countries around the world already do that. You go to many European countries, you know how much it costs to go to medical school? Virtually nothing. So I happen to believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. Let's deal with the issue of guns. And we are in a chamber today named after Ted Kennedy, whose two brothers, John and Bobby, were gunned down. And that is, the time is, again, long overdue for the people of this country, and I think the people are prepared to do it. The question is whether the Congress is prepared to do that, to stand up to the power of the NRA and pass real gun reform legislation. Now, we've seen some progress in recent weeks. We'll see how that plays out. A modest step forward.
Remember when Hillary attacked Bernie like he was ruthlessly pro-gun? Bernie had like a D rating from the NRA, and Hillary pretended he had like an A rating and attacked him like he was a psycho on this issue. No, he's just a moderate who's in favor of intelligent, realistic regulations but doesn't want to ban guns.
But we have got to go further. Are we comfortable living in a nation where anybody can walk into a gun store today and come out with an AR-15, which is designed to mow down people in a military fashion? Are we designed with people able to buy high-capacity ammunition magazines? Are we satisfied with a situation where somebody can go to a gun show and not have a background check? So the time now is, for the sake of our children, for the sake of all of us, to pass serious gun safety legislation and have the courage to stand up to the NRA. The bottom line is, Lindsey talks about votes in the Senate, and he's right. Senate and the House are pretty conservative institutions. Poll after poll show they are not representing where the American people are. Our job is to create a government and elected officials who are prepared to stand up against wealthy campaign contributors and fight for ordinary Americans. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to remind you again that your government is run by Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I find...
This is Bernie's biggest weakness, is that he keeps deferring to his good friend Joe Biden, but Joe Biden's not doing any of the things that Bernie cares about. And so it's hard, it's a hard argument to be like, well, I know Democrats have the presidency, the House, and the Senate, but, more Democrats, you know. It's like, well, why don't you make do with what you have right now and throw your weight around and be aggressive and twist arms and act like FDR or LBJ and find a way to get shit done now? And there is no good answer to that. And so Bernie does have a tough argument as a result of that. This is, without a doubt, Lindsey's strongest point that he keeps making. All the other ones are totally idiotic.
And it's astonishing that the people in charge of your government are not going to vote on things that Bernie thinks will fix the problem. Why? Because they don't want to vote on these ideas.
Yeah, because they're corrupt. That's right. They're corrupt. It's not Bernie. They're corrupt.
Because they won't fix the problem. So
nonsense. Again, they won't vote for Bernie's ideas because they're corrupt. They're bought by corporations and billionaires. It's not that Joe Biden has the wisdom that Bernie Sanders doesn't have. No, Joe Biden's a way worse politician in person than Bernie.
Here's the point. If you want things to change, you got to get new people in Washington to run the place.
Yeah, like the people who were just there a few years ago. Those new ones will fix it, even though they created a lot of the problems.
Because the answer to America's problems, Senator Sanders, is not more socialism.
Yes, it is.
Your own message. What time is it? It's time to raise taxes on the rich.
Correct.
Your completely own message.
And he's right.
Why do we have such a problem at the border, Senator Sanders? It's because policy matters.
He can't stop talking about the border, and he hasn't acknowledged once that Joe Biden is actually very right-wing on the border and agrees with Republicans on the border.
2 million people will come across this country illegally. Only God knows how many we will miss. It's a complete accident waiting to happen down there. We went from having a secure border, having Mexico work with us. We changed our laws so we could have control, and it's all gone away. Folks, if you don't change who's running Washington, the worst is yet to come when it comes to illegal immigration. Gas prices. The reason gas prices are so high is because the policies they've imposed are not working for you. This is a painful transition, as described with President Biden. Their goal is to drive fossil fuels into extinction in the United States. We're talking about getting Iran to produce more gas, Venezuela to produce more gas, the Arabs to produce more gas, to lower prices.
I love how Lindsey Graham is totally fine morally with us doing business with Saudi Arabia, but he draws a moral line when it comes to Iran and Venezuela. Well, Iran and Venezuela, by any objective measure, are much better than Saudi Arabia when it comes to human rights abuses. There's no doubt about that. Saudi Arabia is by far and away the worst if you compare Saudi Arabia with Iran and Venezuela. But he's outraged at the idea that maybe Iran and Venezuela could provide a stopgap and working with them is fine. He's outraged by that. There's zero moral consistency here. If anything, he thinks the worst human rights abuser is the one who it makes more sense to do business with.
Here, we should be producing more oil and gas here. And when you say it's the oil company's fault,
we are the number one producers, and yes, it is their fault.
They're in a business. The reason they're not producing more is because it's impossible to produce more under this administration. And if Bernie was in charge and people like him, it'd get worse, not better. All I can say is that gas prices are going through the roof, and nothing's going to change until you change Washington. Now, I don't expect to fix many of these problems with Bernie. I'll try. But there are plenty of Democrats up there who I think would have a phased-in approach to energy production. We went from being energy independent to having to mortgage your house to fill up your car. How the hell did that happen? It happened because of policy. You got a chance to fix this, American people, and I would ask you to fix it. Put Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate to stop this craziness and see if we can find a path forward from 22 to 24 to get things back to more normal. People out there, Senator Sanders.
Yeah, that should be their argument. That was the Joe Biden argument in 2020. And to be fair, it kind of worked. Like, we got to go back to normal. Trump's crazy. The Republican argument, it sounds like, let's just go back to normal. So not what's happening now. Look, that might actually work. Because Biden is so underwhelming and so bad. And the last thing he did to materially help people was cut $1,400 checks. But that was so long ago, he hasn't done anything recently. So these shitty arguments from Lindsey Graham might actually land. Which speaks to how pathetic the Democrats are, because these arguments are, like, mind-numbingly stupid.
Are living in hell. $600 a month due to inflation, and wages are not going up. America deserves better than this. We can do better than this. But the path charted by Senator Sanders is full-on socialism.
It's social democracy, and social democracy objectively, empirically works a zillion times better. If you look at the social democratic countries in Scandinavia, they don't deal with a lot of the same problems we deal with, which is why Bernie Sanders is laughing, because Lindsey Graham is a total partisan hack and a weirdo.
Full-on, unequivocal socialism from cradle to grave. That's not...
It should be, if you can't win an argument without strawmanning your opponent, then you just can't win that argument. Like, it's pathetic that you have to strawman Bernie in order to try to win the argument. You should absolutely be able to steelman Bernie and still beat him in the debate. But he can't do that, because if you steelman Bernie's ideas, you'll find out they're obviously way more reasonable than Lindsey Graham's ideas.
Not going to fix America. We are not a socialist nation. There is a better way. And I'll promise you this. If I'm chairman of any committee, particularly the budget committee, if we take over, I will sit down with Democrats and Republicans to find a way to fix our national debt, which is appalling.
Our national debt! That's like 23rd down the list of things Americans care deeply about at this moment. I mean, what a ridiculous concern. Jesus Christ.
Something like Simpson Bowls, not socialism.
Something like Simpson Bowls and not socialism. Jesus Christ. All right, let's keep this going here. Let's see what we got.
Begin. You all talked a lot about gas prices. That is front of mind for most Americans because they see it every day. They're going up. They're on the rise, some of the highest we've seen as of yet. Senator Sanders, President Biden has said recently that this is, and Senator Graham mentioned it, part of a giant transition for the U.S. economy. Is pain at the pump part of that transition to a greener economy?
Well, let me say this, that in terms of inflation, as I'm sure you know, we're looking at an international phenomenon. Germany is the powerhouse of Europe. Their inflation rate, I believe, is 7.8%. UK, somewhat similar. We're a little bit higher than that. So what we're looking at right now, for a variety of reasons, including COVID and breaking of supply chains having to do with China and elsewhere, and I think the greed of corporate America, you add all that stuff together, we're looking at inflation. Now, what I happen to believe, Brett, I think it is totally irresponsible for us to ignore what scientists call the existential threat to climate change. I think we've got to go forward in two ways. I think we can create millions of jobs transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency. And
what Bernie's saying here is not wrong, but he really didn't answer the question. And the answer to the question should be no. When they say, oh, like, is the pain at the pump necessary in order to get to the green and renewable technology future? He should have said, no, it's not. I want to keep those gas prices low until we make that transition. And then when we make that transition, we'll use the new technologies. So he didn't really answer that question, which is not a good look because people will notice he's not answering it. But in terms of the stuff he's saying here on its own merits, it's perfectly reasonable.
Sustainable energy. And I think at the same time, I think the president has got to call those oil companies, those executives into the Oval Office and say, stop ripping off the American people. You can make some money, but you don't have to see a tripling of your profits over last year. You don't have to see $35 billion in profit in one quarter.
That's not strong enough. That's the same as Hillary wagging her finger at Wall Street and saying, cut it out.
So we are in that bind where you have to deal with climate change or Charleston is going to be underwater. New York City will be underwater. On the other hand, we have got to protect the average American who cannot afford to pay $5 for a gallon of gas. That's the dilemma, and that's the way we've got to go forward.
Senator Graham, to Senator Sanders' point, is there some corporate greed and profiteering that factors in there? You said it was bull up there, but do you think there's any part of that, to Senator Sanders' point?
Thank you. I think it's supply and demand. I mean,
60% of inflation is going to corporate profits. 60%.
When we were locked down right after COVID hit in 2020, we all went into a lockdown. Gas went to $1.77 a gallon because all of us were home. We weren't working. We were locked down to try to protect each other. The economy is coming back. It was at $2.38 when President Biden took over. What's happened in the last 2 years? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. Their campaign agenda was to destroy fossil fuel production. It's not.
Imagine believing that. Imagine believing that was Joe Biden's campaign promise. And that's what he's going to deliver on. What a joke.
Gas companies not wanting to produce more oil and gas. It's the policies have made that almost impossible here at home. Russia, which is invading Ukraine, and one thing Bernie and I agree is that Putin sucks. So, and
I assume you concede that point?
I'm not in favor of the vulgarity, but the intent is correct.
All right. Putin's a bad guy. Yeah, there we go. I'll use the other word. The bottom line is people know when they go to the pump it doesn't have to be this way. I don't see anything changing until you change leadership. It's not the oil companies, it's the policies that's put us out of the fossil fuel business. Some ray of hope. I believe in climate change. Pretty obvious to me that greenhouse gas effect is real. We're going to electrify the transportation fleet by the mid-2030, 2040, somewhere in that time period. Most cars on the road will be electric. Until we get there, there's no reason to drive this generation of Americans into poverty by going to the pump. You have to do two things.
The problem is, number one, he doesn't really mean that, oh, we're eventually going to get there. Number two, you would need to make that transition sooner. There's no doubt about that. So he's like, yeah, it's real, but like, let's lollygag our way to changing it. That's not urgent enough. And clearly you're not listening to the advice of the scientists and the experts.
Once. You have to deal with the economy you have today, increase oil and gas production, reverse the policies on the Keystone Pipeline, get oil from Canada. Better to get oil from Canada than it is from the Mideast. So I want more energy production here, but as we phase into electric vehicles, and we will, then we have to look at power generators, Bernie. We're going to have to, wind and solar are great, but they're not enough. The transition fuel will be gas. We should be sending American-owned natural gas to Europe. There are 2 terminals developed by Germans to receive natural gas from America. We need to unleash American natural gas production to help ourselves, but also to help our friends in Europe so they'd be less dependent on Putin. So my energy strategy is national security as much as anything else. One thing we'd agree on, if the world were less dependent on fossil fuels, who would be the biggest losers? The Iranians, the Russians, Venezuela. So let's get to that better.
Well, to some extent, but we're the #1 producer of oil and gas. So those, fossil fuel companies are going to do everything they can to keep us on fossil fuels. And he's totally oblivious to that fact.
Let's don't do it this way. You're doing it in a way that's destroying the American economy. The average American is going to be spending $500 more to fuel their car this year than last. And the inflation in this country is caused by bad policy choices. And it's not going to change until you get new people in charge in Washington. Vote Republican in 2022.
Senator Sanders?
If I could.
Yep.
What Lindsey is not dealing with is inflation is not just Joe Biden's issue. You have to explain why it takes place around the world, and that has to do with supply chains, the terrible war in Ukraine, and in my view, corporate greed. Lindsey said...
And monopolies, but that's tied into the corporate greed thing.
The oil companies can't. Gee whiz, they're just tied up. They just cannot produce more oil. But apparently, they got $88 billion this year to give stock buybacks. In other words, they have the money to invest in new oil production if they chose to do that. Now, Lindsey also makes the point that, we've got to move to electric vehicles, and I certainly support that. The problem is, Lindsey, we are in a moment of, what's the word that I can use? I guess the scientists use it, existential, all right? We're seeing temperature rise all over the world. That means more drought, less food production. It means more flooding. It means more migration because people around the world are not going to be able to grow the food or get the water, that they need more disease. So this is not saying, well, it's a good idea to move toward energy efficiency and sustainable energy. No, we have to do it right now if we love our children and our grandchildren. And the challenge that we have is, how do you do it without forcing working people to pay $5 for a gallon of gas? I think we could do it, but it's not either or.
So that's back to my original question. Do you think that the high price of gas speeds up that transition in your mind and worth the price that it costs?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Brett.
No, I know it's not, but I'm just trying to get to how you do it.
No, I think what we have got to do is, and of course, build back better. Lindsey's here beating up on the president all the time. We passed, in terms of the American Rescue Plan, we passed a $1.9 trillion piece of legislation, which went a long way. Let's remember where we were in the midst of the pandemic. Massive unemployment. Thousands of people dying every single day. And we passed legislation which said, you're a working family, you're hurting, we're going to get a check to you. You're unemployed, we're going to extend unemployment benefits. You're a hospital that's going broke, we're going to get money to you. You need a vaccine, but you can't get it, we're going to make it possible for you to get it. We're going to improve schools to deal with the pandemic. We passed that. The president deserves credit for that. But again, in terms of high energy prices, we have got to do a lot more here in the United States. But just to blame the president You know, the Republicans were in power. You know, they had a great record. They had massive tax breaks to the richest people in this country. And I think Lindsey voted to throw 32 million Americans off of the health insurance that they have. Great record.
He's breaking out the whooping stick now, y'all. He is breaking out the whooping stick.
Massive income and wealth inequality growth. So we have to be thoughtful about how we go forward. But beating up on the president is just not good enough.
Let's try to get to something you both agree on. You have voted similarly on trade issues before. When it comes to lifting tariffs on China, I assume you're both in the no category. Is that fair?
It depends. If it's for solar installations, I would support it. We need to get more solar paneling into this country. But I don't know Lindsey's record on this. I have, over the years, in the House and in the Senate, believed that the trade policies that Democrats and Republicans, Clinton and Bush, brought forth, which said that to American workers, yeah, we're going to pass NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. We're going to allow corporations to shut down by the thousands in America and then move to China or Mexico. I thought then that was a disaster. I believe now that has been a disaster.
Senator Graham?
Yeah, I'd be very reluctant. I think the tariffs imposed on China basically levels the field because they cheat. So one reason that Mexico decided to keep illegal immigrants in Mexico until their court date would come at the United States regarding asylum is that Trump threatened to put tariffs on products coming out of Mexico. And that actually worked because of what he did with China. But back to the American Rescue Plan. We worked together about $6 trillion of bipartisan spending to help with COVID. It rocked the world. A million people lost their lives, doctors and nurses. We've all gone through hell. But the American Rescue Plan, according to Larry Summers, not Lindsey Graham, was ill-conceived and ill-designed, and he said would do more to spark inflation than any policy initiative in the last several decades. This was in March last year.
Larry Summers is a neoliberal economist who's been perpetually wrong about absolutely everything. So citing Larry Summers is not an own. It's a self-own. It's an own goal. Because I don't believe a word that guy says. That guy was on the forefront of every disastrous policy of the 1990s and 2000s that led us into the oblivion.
He was right. 9% of the $1.9 trillion.
Again, inflation, 60% of inflation is going to corporate profits. The problem outside of that is monopolies and the supply chain. That's where inflation is coming from, which is why, as Bernie pointed out, you see inflation not just in the U.S. There's a number of places dealing with inflation.
Went to vaccines and testing. 5 million went to this place, and I love this place. Pickleball courts. There's still $200 or $300 billion left unspent. Everything Larry Summers said about the American Rescue Plan, increasing inflation, happened. The reason we can't find baby formula is our policies here. We're down to 2 or 3 places in America that can make baby formula.
Yeah, monopoly power. Monopoly power. And then also, they didn't care about safety regulations. And so they were making a dangerous product that was killing babies. The government had to step in and say, holy shit, you can't do that. And then instead of shutting it down and deep cleaning it and reopening it, they just shut it down permanently. And then, holy shit, look at that, we have a massive shortage.
The reason gas prices are high is when you took over, Senator Sanders, you took out of production 10 million acres that were in production. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Your policies are leading to a surge in gas prices with no end to them. So all I can suggest to the American people, this inflationary death spiral we're in is being driven by policies that don't work. And finally, have we said anything about how to control an out-of-control border? Is there a solution in the making to control the border?
You can't say Lindsey Graham is not on message because he just keeps bringing up the same 3 or 4 issues over and over and over and over.
Before it's too late. This is why when you vote in 2022, I hope you'll realize that the course we're on now is very dangerous for this country in multiple ways.
Talk about it. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
When we talk about voting in 2022, obviously my hope is you will not follow Senator Graham's advice. I have a lot of problems with the Democrats, but they are far superior to where the Republicans are. Let me give you an example. When we talk about major crises, I think many leading political scientists will tell you that right now we're looking, for the first time in my lifetime, and yours, at a real threat to the existence of democracy in America. And you know why? Because we have a former president, his name is Donald Trump, who goes around the country telling people, hey, I won the election. In fact, I probably won it by a landslide, but they stole it. They took it away from me. All right? Now, that happens to be what we call a big lie. And yet many of the Republicans that Senator Graham are asking you to vote for are maintaining that big lie. What does that mean? It goes beyond Trump. It goes beyond the 2020 election. It means what they are saying is the entire system, you can't trust anybody. And if you can't trust the election results, then what is the obvious alternative? We need a strong man, all right? Conservatives went to, I think it was Hungary, to meet with Mr. Orban, who runs an authoritarian-type society. So the struggle we're facing is not just that Lindsey and I disagree on this or that issue, which we do. It is the future of American democracy and whether we move to authoritarianism based on, among other things, a very big lie.
Well, quickly, can you address that, Senator?
Trump lost the election.
Can you address that, Senator? I mean, can you say definitively the election was not stolen?
Yeah, I voted to certify the election. There was some mail-in balloting chicanery out there, but no, I voted to certify the election. President Biden's the president. And
Did he win the election?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what about all of the candidates out there who are trying to say that he didn't? Your Republican candidates that you want people to vote for?
Well, what about the people saying defund the police? You talk to them, I'll talk that crap.
Well, your crowd is not going to the microphone.
Oh, Lindsey. Oh, Lindsey, you're a mess, bro.
So here's the point. Why is he talking about Trump? Because he can't talk about anything else. He can't tell you rationally why there's no end to gas prices. It's always somebody else. It's the oil companies, it's the drug companies. These policies...
It is not a stretch to say that the oil companies are responsible for the price of gas. Come on, dude. Try a little harder.
Not working, Senators. We like President Trump or not, he secured our border. We had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years because he got Mexico and the Triangle countries to help us.
And what did Joe Biden do? He continued Trump's policies, something you are refusing to admit.
Not work against us. He took on China for the first time, literally in my lifetime. We were energy independent because he put in production, more acreage. He allowed us to drill responsibly in Anwar, and he approved the Keystone Pipeline. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together under his leadership, called the Abraham Accords. We replaced the USMCA, NAFTA with the USMCA. So the one thing I would say to President Trump, talk about what you did. Compare your record to what's going on now. You may actually win to the American people.
I love that argument because he's pretending that Trump was not like a standard establishment Republican like a standard establishment Republican in 98% of ways. Again, his biggest legislative accomplishment was what? A giant tax cut for the rich and corporations in 2017, where 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. So this idea that he's like some outsider crusading for working people is preposterous. The guy took over $1 million from predatory payday loan industry, and then he took it from them through his inauguration, and then he turned around and lifted all the regulations on them and dropped the court cases on them. So, I mean, the guy is as corrupt can be. He's not some sort of working class savior, as Lindsey Graham is pretending.
If you don't change who's running your government, things are going to get dramatically worse at the border. Gas prices are going to continue to skyrocket. Inflation is out of control. The policies these people are pushing are never going to work. That doesn't mean we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I can tell you right now, the pathway to socialism is being paved as I speak, and the worst is yet to come. Vote Republican in 2020.
Right. Yes. You know, Senator Sanders, you chuckled before when Senator Graham mentioned socialism.
Yes.
And you kind of
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Right. And so I want to let you deal with that about directly
I understand
socialism.
we can do red baiting. I guess it works among a certain part
Well,
of the
you're a
population.
socialist, aren't you?
I am a democratic socialist.
Okay, I'm
and
sorry.
the policies that I advocate are taking place all over the world. So I would like to ask Senator Graham, do you think raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is socialistic? Do you think doing what every other major country on earth does, guaranteeing health care to all people, is socialistic? Do you think expanding Medicare to cover dental care is quite socialistic? Do you think in terms of Social Security, you know, you're on the Budget Committee, we just had a hearing about this. Lindsey and I disagree on this. I think we should increase benefits for Social Security recipients by lifting the cap, which is now at $147,000. So a millionaire pays the same amount as somebody making $147,000. Lift that cap, we can increase Social Security benefits by $200 a month for every beneficiary in America. Is that socialistic? Is making sure that all of our kids are able to get a higher education? Is that socialistic? Is saying that 3 Wall Street companies should not control $20 trillion in assets, we got to break them up? Is that socialistic? Is saying that CEOs should...
Damn, son. Stop, he's already bleeding. He's already dead. What are you doing, dog? Nah, he's wrecking him. Because what he's doing here is he's laying out like, look, call these things whatever you want to call these things. They're really intelligent. They're really popular, and people like it. And they're right to like it.
should not make 350 times what their workers make. So, I understand that certain words will have an impact on certain parts of our country. But take a look at the issues that we are fighting for on every one of those issues. Lindsey, guess what? American people support me, not you.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Wrecked, son. OD wrecked.
How do you solve problems? We're in the Ted Kennedy Orrin Hatch world. All I can say about your Social Security plan, you want to increase benefits when the program's going broke, folks.
He just said, raise the cap, which means you raise the tax on the rich. So right now, you pay the same Social Security tax on $147,000 as you do on $3 million a year. If you raise that cap, you can fund Social Security as far as the eye can see, because somebody who makes $3 million will pay a higher tax rate, which will fund Social Security more. So he already answered this question. Why are you acting like he didn't just answer this? And again, what he's saying is popular. People want to do this because they want Social Security to function, and they want to get their Social Security check because they paid into it for all these years.
When I was 21, my mom died. When I was 22, my dad died. I had a 13-year-old sister. We moved in with an aunt and uncle who worked in the textile plants. My world was rocked. If it hadn't been for survivor benefits coming into my family, because my sister was a minor, we'd had a hard time making it. I'm 66.
Yeah, now you want to turn around and cut everybody else's benefits because you're a massive prick and you already made it.
I'm not married. I'm part of the problem. We need more kids out there. When in 1955, there were 9 workers paying into the system, 9 workers for every retiree. We're down to 3. 20 years, it'd be 2. Let's do something like Ted Kennedy would do. Get Republicans and Democrats to find a way, like the Gang of Six, the Simpson-Bowles plan. Senator Sanders, bring your Social Security plan to the floor. All it does is raise taxes. To get out of this mess, people like...
Yeah, raise taxes on the wealthy to fund Social Security, which again is very popular. Why are you swatting that aside?
Like me are going to have to take a little less and pay a little more in. We're going to have to...
That's exactly what Bernie's talking about. That's exactly what Bernie's talking about. Not that you take less, but that you pay more.
Adjust the age one more time like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did. There is a...
So just cut benefits for people by raising the age that you can get it. Oh, wow. Thanks. Great idea. Cut benefits is Lindsey's brilliant idea. Deeply unpopular idea.
Bipartisan way forward. But you describe problems, but your answer is always the government. It's always...
Your answer is always the private market. And the private market has shown itself to not work in many respects on many issues. You can't have a private military. You can't have a private police department. You can't have private fire departments. You can't have private health insurance because the incentive structure in those areas is beyond fucked up and it leads to a terrible decaying society. So yeah, his answer is always government because if you're not talking about the private market, well, what's the other option? The other option would be the government. Now, what Bernie wants is an intelligent hybrid of socialism and capitalism. He is a democratic socialist. Really, he's a social democrat. What he wants is rational. What he wants is a intelligent hybrid. What you want is capitalism and the private market to dominate everything, and that's a dog-eat-dog world with terrible, perverse incentive structures that screw over working people on a regular basis.
Socialism.
Social Security is a government program. I'm sorry about it.
Senator Sanders, your Medicare for All program eliminates private sector health care. It's a $40 trillion revenue increase.
It saves money. It saves money because you're getting rid of the for-profit middleman. And yes, I hope it gets rid of private insurance, to tell you the truth, because private insurance is nothing but a scam. They are a mafia. They are a middleman. They shake you down and provide nothing of value. The whole idea of single payer is everything, when it comes to healthcare, whatever treatment you're getting, whatever surgery you're getting, it just comes out of your tax dollars. So whatever you paid in taxes, it goes towards taking care of your bill when you get sick, so you can walk out and pay $0.00. Wouldn't that be lovely? I think it would be.
It will cost more to maintain Medicare for all than the entire federal government today. There has to be some sense of responsibility here. You just can't tax people into oblivion and turn every problem over to the government.
Okay, let's respond. And I'm glad it's a good discussion. Thank you, Brett. Okay, Social Security. And again, we had, Lindsey and I on the Budget Committee, we had a hearing on it. But you forgot to tell people, Lindsey, you're right. Social Security has a solvency issue. But the actuaries say we want 75 years of funding coming into Social Security to maintain for 75 years. What I advocated does that.
Let's vote.
Because it is let's vote on it.
Let's vote on it.
Voting on it. Let's ask the American people whether they think it makes sense that somebody who makes $1 million a year or $10 million a year or $100 million a year pays the same amount into Social Security. Somebody makes $147,000.
Let's vote on it.
Let's ask them. You know what?
The reason why Lindsey keeps saying let's vote on it is because he's trying to portray Bernie's ideas as ridiculous because they wouldn't get a lot of votes. No, Lindsey, if anything, that exposes the Senate as ridiculous because, again, you guys are corrupt and you guys are neoliberal. And so you don't represent the will of the American people, and Bernie Sanders does. So this smug let's vote on it and see. Yeah, you know what? You're right. Bernie Sanders will propose 1,000 different ideas, and 999 of them will get voted down. And that's a problem with you guys, not with Bernie Sanders. He's the one who's on the right side of it. He's the one, if you look at all the polling, the American people are with him. So this smug, let's vote on it, you unserious goon. No, you are unserious. And this is why the Senate has an approval rating that's roughly around 20% all the time, because nobody likes any of you guys, because they know you're all corrupt and you're all backwards. And Bernie is the only one who has a high approval rating. He's the most popular senator in the country. And it's because people know, agree with him or disagree with him, he's trying to do the things that people want. He's honest, he's authentic, he's straightforward, and he has the policy positions that Americans agree with.
The polling has already given us the answer. They think it is.
Why aren't we voting on it? I mean,
all right, well, let me ask it a different way, Senator Sanders.
Right?
Let me ask it. Let me ask. Hold on.
Because his plan, the reason he doesn't want to vote on it, nobody's going to vote on it.
I want to vote on it. I'm happy to vote.
Because all you guys are corrupt. Stop. This is not an own. You're owning yourself. You're owning the entire Senate because nobody likes the fucking Senate.
Sarge, let's vote.
Oh, could I get the Senate Sergeant at Arms here? No, I'm sorry. Let me ask the question this way. The national debt, Senator Sanders, stands at more than $30 trillion. Yep. That's 133% of GDP, gross domestic product. Should Americans care about that? Yep. Is that a problem long term?
Yes, it is. It is, and it's something we want.
Wrong. No, it's not. It is not a problem. This all relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of what the national debt even is. It's the accumulation of all the debt since the literal founding of the nation. Every big civilized nation has a national debt. And our debt to GDP ratio, which is the thing that you should really look at, is not, crazy compared to other countries. So, no, this is not a big issue. And don't give in to the right-wing framing on this.
To deal with. Now, what Lindsey says, which is the Republican line, Social Security, Medicare for all, going to raise your taxes. You know what? It will. But you know what else it's going to do? You ain't going to have to pay a nickel in premiums, a nickel in co-payments, a nickel in deductibles. And if you are the average family out there, or the average small business, or in fact the average corporation, you are going to save money. Now, Lindsey apparently thinks that people just love paying money to the insurance companies. Average family, average person in America, Lindsey, $12,000 a year. Insurance companies making huge profits. So if I go to the American people and I say, hey, Brett, guess what? You're going to pay more. You're going to pay $5,000 more in taxes, but you're going to pay $8,000 less in premiums, deductibles, and co-payments. Now, I know he works for Fox. Maybe he can't say it. But most people would say, Bernie, that's a pretty good deal. You saved me $3,000, and you're guaranteeing comprehensive health care.
Senator, I was waiting for the Fox. Yeah, I was waiting. Okay. Let's see if we can get to something you all agree on. Is there a common ground on any issue that the two of you can see eye to eye on, and what is that?
Well, I don't know if, I'm on the budget committee with Bernie, and it's been a blast. Listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, if I get to be chairman, vote Republican 2022. We're going to have
said that a few times.
Yeah. So I'm going to call, remember Simpson Bowles guys, those guys? I'm going to call him in and say, okay, what would you advise us to do when it comes to saving Social Security? In 2034, if nothing changes, they can only pay 77% of the benefits because there are less people working and more people retired and they're living longer. So we all got this kind of Medicare is hanging by a thread. 2028, Part A begins to go bankrupt. There's things we can do. Here's where I think upper income Americans, like both of us, I am willing to take less from Social Security. I'm willing to have a different COLA and reshape my benefits. I'm willing to pay into more.
So in other words, he wants to make it more of a welfare program as opposed to having a universal benefit. And what'll happen if you do that is in the long run, they'll be able to chip away even more and they'll be able to destroy the program. Because it's much easier to demonize a welfare program than it is to demonize a universal program. So his idea is trash.
More into Part A and B. I shouldn't be getting a subsidy because I'm doing pretty well. That kind of approach, Brett, entitlements are going to consume the budget. Right now, we're at 2050, we're going to have 185% of debt to GDP. Medicare and Social Security and other entitlement programs are worth saving are going to consume the debt. We're down to a small fraction.
See, look at the framing of all this. Like, oh, Medicare and Social Security, oh, these things are a big problem. Oh, we need to quote-unquote reform them. Really what that means is cut them. Like, look at the conversation he's having at a time when Americans are struggling.
Of the federal pie to run the discretionary part of government. So entitlement reform is a must for us to not become Greece. So I'd like to work with Bernie to see if I can let's raise the cap, okay, 147, let's raise it. If you raise it to 190,000, you capture 90% of most wages in the country. Let's look at maybe adjusting the age one more time if we need to.
No.
Let's look at having a
So in other words, take Social Security away from a lot of people. That's what he wants to do.
COLA for people 80 in the lower income brackets, better than what I would get. Let's shift some of the burden from people who can afford to shift to some that can't, to get through the baby boomers retiring. I'm really in finding a solution to entitlement reform. I'd like, I'm talking too much, I'll turn it over. Energy production. We can have a lower carbon economy, but you can't do it this way.
Okay, Lindsey raised some good questions. Now, I hope everybody understands. When Lindsey talks about entitlement reform, what he's talking about is cutting benefits and raising the retirement age. Talks about Simpson Bowles. I oppose Simpson Bowles because that is what they wanted to do. So here is the alternative on this one. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, where people on the top are doing phenomenally well, yes, Lindsey, they're going to have to pay more in taxes so that somebody earning the average Social Security benefit of $15,000 a year gets a break.
So let me just say, the question from Brett Baer is like, are there any issues where you guys can agree? And what you're getting from these responses is no. And that's just like I told you earlier in this, that there's no crossover here. Like if you get me in the room with a libertarian right-winger, yeah, we'll agree on the drug war, we'll agree on civil liberties, we'll agree on ending wars. There's real crossover. There's no crossover between Bernie Sanders and Lindsey Graham, because Lindsey Graham is a neocon partisan Republican, and Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. So there's nothing there. There's no there. There are areas where there's crossover with different ideological factions, but with these two in particular, there is no crossover. And what you're seeing here is they can't answer his question because the answer is no.
Okay? So I think you should lift the cap completely. You'll make Social Security solvent for 75 years, solve the legitimate issue you raised. And yes, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk will pay a lot more in taxes.
Well, that's
so what? Now, I want to say on Medicare, 1 minute.
On the common ground question.
Yeah.
I didn't get it out of that answer.
Well, what you got is that he sees it as a problem, I see it as a problem. All right? Medicare, I see Medicare solvency as a problem. That is why I want us to stop spending twice as much per person on healthcare as any other country on earth, so that the insurance companies and drug companies don't continue to make huge profits. So I'd ask my friend, do you think it makes sense, Lindsey, that we have 70 million people uninsured and underinsured at the same time as insurance companies make huge profits and we spend twice as much as any other country on healthcare? Does that make sense to you? Is that a system that is worth defending?
I think here's the first thing I won't do. I will not take your private health care away from you unless you want it taken away yourself. His solution to your health care problem is to take away from you the health care you have today in the private sector. There are 200 million.
It's to give everybody a right to health care, a right to it. Whereas even if you like your current plan, there are certain things that it doesn't cover. That's a problem. That's a problem. So he keeps defending the private system. And any objective analysis of our private system would conclude this thing is total trash.
And people below 65 that are insured in the private sector. I'd like to make it more efficient. I'd like to cover more people. When it comes to Medicare, we all get in the system when we're 65. He wants Medicare for all. He's going to invite hundreds of millions of people, tens of millions of people into the system that hadn't paid a dime. Medicare is hanging by a thread now. I guess the difference between Bernie and myself is that I know there is no way in hell we're going to fix Medicare with the Republicans or Social Security with the Republicans. I've got to give some. I'm willing to raise the cap. I'm willing to get people to pay more into the system. But we live in a global economy, folks. We had a 35% corporate rate. It went to 21. We're the highest in the developed world. Companies can leave America and go somewhere else. Tax policy matters. We can create tax systems in this country to drive people away. We can create tax systems in this country to incentivize job growth.
All right.
Final thought. Bipartisanship is the only way to solve these problems. Take your bills that you've put down as solutions, put them on the floor, and here's what you're going to find. No bipartisan support.
Because you guys are corrupt.
There is a bipartisan agreement currently on gun control legislation. 10 senators on the Republican side have signed on. Senator Graham, you're one of them. It's in formulation. The legislation is being written, but it deals with mental health, advocating for red flag laws, tightening background checks, licensed firearm dealers. There are some specifics in there. Senator Sanders, you're not on as of yet. Is that a common ground issue around the edges that don't deal with everything you want that you all can get to?
Right. Look, if that bill, and you're right, it hasn't been written yet. We have an outline of it. If that bill came to the floor, would I vote for it? I'm quite sure I would. Does it go anywhere near far enough? No, it does not. I mean, at the end of the day, Lindsey, you're going to have to, you're asking people to vote Republican, you're going to have to ask your Republican colleagues whether or not they think it's okay that anybody can walk into a gun store, go through a background check. You could be suicidal, you could be homicidal. You could have all kinds of issues. Buy a AR.
What the hell is that?
Stand
What the hell is that?
by if you would.
What the fuck is that noise?
Not sure what that is. I don't think it's the NRA.
The Chinese.
Well, that may not be the
Chinese.
NRA. That may not be the NRA, but the fact that we don't have serious gun safety legislation is the NRA. But I think as a nation, and I know, look, I come from a rural state, and a lot of my constituents hunt, and I believe people have every right.
Sorry, Senator.
Okay.
Apologize.
You know, every right.
What on earth is going on, bro? Holy shit.
All right, before we were rudely interrupted by the speaker, Senator, you were making a point about the gun legislation.
Look, I think it is a step forward. I think clearly it does not go far enough. And as a nation, and again, as I said, I come from a rural state, you know, most people do not use AR-15s to hunt deer. These are weapons, these are military-type weapons designed to kill people as quickly as possible, to mow people down. And as a nation, we are going to have to decide whether or not it is appropriate to do what virtually no other major country does, allow somebody to walk into a gun store and buy one of these weapons and then come out, and if they're suicidal or homicidal or whatever they may be, just mow people down. And the tragedies we've seen recently in Buffalo and Texas, I mean, unspeakable. I'm just horrible beyond words. So those are the decisions. I think this is a start, but I believe we have to go much, much further.
Senator, a closing statement here as we're coming to the end of this segment, and I was trying to find the common ground. I'm not sure we really got there, but there's promise, right, Senator?
No comment.
No comment.
So let me tell you what.
It's true. Lindsey Graham is not the guy you can find any common ground with. You might be able to find some with Rand Paul on certain issues. You might be able to find some with Josh Hawley on certain issues. You're not going to find anything with Lindsey Graham. There's just no way.
But I think the common ground is what we've done in the past. Senator Kennedy worked on a comprehensive immigration bill with me and others, and I wish.
All right, guys, I'm going to speed this up because I'm tired of covering this. Let's go to 2 times.
We'd have passed it because most of these problems would have gone away. He worked with President Bush on No Child Left Behind. There's a model here that works. Listen, I admire Senator Sanders. He has his own message. He's got solutions. I don't think they'll work. I've never had such a hard time begging somebody to vote on their own bill. The bottom line is there are ways forward, but it's going to be a bipartisan path. That's the way it's been in the past, the way it will be in the future, and I stand ready to do that. But we need to stop this madness. What's going on in Washington needs to stop, and these people in charge need to be told no, because your family life's going to get worse unless we do. Let's talk about guns. We made some news here today. Senator Sanders says he'd be open-minded, depending on how it's written, to the package we've negotiated. That's a big deal, because it's not what he would want. To his credit, there are things in there that you would want that we can't put in the package for different because other people don't want them. So the fact that Bernie's willing, Brett, maybe to vote for this is very encouraging to me. We'll see how it shakes out. And what happened here? You know, after New York, after Buffalo, and after the shooting in Texas, there's a common thing. Very disturbed people getting guns and doing terrible things with them. I own an AR-15. I served in the military, and I got an AR-15 with a SEAL in my reserve unit. If you ever have to defend yourself, maybe a double-barrel shotgun at your house, if everything breaks down and the mobs come, it's not enough. We're not going to ban assault weapons. We did that, tried to vote on that in 2013, got 60 no votes. But we can do some things. We can enhance background checks for 18 to 21-year-olds. We can give states who have red flag laws money to hire more psychologists, more psychiatrists, and more cops. We can do some things on the mental health front that will maybe intervene in these people's lives before it's too late. So this package, with Bernie's support, if we can write it the right way, we'll get 70 votes. And that's no small thing. So I want to say this as we close. Thank you, Bernie, for being willing to be open-minded to supporting this package, because if you do, I think it will give cover on the left from people who are upset it's not enough. John Cornyn, Mitch McConnell, maybe myself, will give some cover to people on the right when people say it's too much. So it'd be a great thing if the Senate could come together and do this pretty soon.
Final words, Senator.
If I could, and again, thank you for this discussion. The difference, the political difference, aside from all of the ideas that we disagree on between Lindsey and myself, is Lindsey keeps saying, let's go to the Senate, let's go to the House, let's have bipartisanship. I'm all for that. When I was in the House, I probably passed more legislation on the floor with Republican support than any other member. I'm for that. But at the end of the day, there is a bigger issue, Lindsey. And the issue that we have to ask is, in fact, in this moment in history, is the United States Congress, in fact, representing the needs of the majority of the people in our country, or are they representing powerful special interests? And I think most people, frankly, whether they are conservative Republicans or progressives, will tell me that the Congress is way, way out of touch with the needs of the American people. Now, you may disagree with Medicare for all. You may disagree with expanding Social Security, lifting the cap, whatever it may be. That's not where the American people are at. So, yeah, I believe in bipartisanship. But more important, I believe we have a corrupt political system dominated by wealthy campaign contributors. I think we've got to end this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. I think we've got to revitalize American democracy. We have to need Republicans to say Trump is not telling the truth. He did not win the election. That democracy, with all of its faults, is better than authoritarianism. So that's where I think Lindsey and I disagree.
Senator Sanders, Senator Graham, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, there you guys go. Yeah, look, to that last point, final thing I'll say is this. Bipartisanship isn't inherently good or bad. It just is. And it all depends on the specifics. So NAFTA was bipartisan. Permanent normal trade relations with China was bipartisan. Wall Street deregulation was bipartisan. The Iraq War was bipartisan. Those are all examples of terrible bipartisanship. But then there's also Bernie Sanders and Mike Lee working together to end the genocide in Yemen. and try to, decouple from Saudi Arabia. That was positive. Now, Trump vetoed that, but that was positive bipartisanship. Fighting back against the Patriot Act with an alliance between Bernie and Rand Paul. That's bipartisanship. So there are examples of working on the drug war, some bipartisan bill on the drug war to roll it back, the First Step Act. That's good bipartisanship. So it can be good, it can be bad. It depends on the specifics. But of course, Bernie's right that Lindsey Graham's not ready to meet this moment because he's a status quo defender, and we need anything but the status quo right now. So anyway, there's the debate. I thought it was interesting. Hope you guys enjoyed it.